Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take complex source material and really distill it down into the essential knowledge you need to get informed and, quickly and thoroughly.
Mm.
And today, we're doing a particularly powerful deep dive. We're looking at the conceptual framework of Abdul Hashim Bo Muhammad's work, From Africa to America, The Stolen Story.
And our mission here, it's not really to navigate this as historians, looking at facts or dates. It's more about us as cultural thinkers analyzing a framework for resilience.
Right.
The author is very clear on this. This book is foundational. It's not a chronology. It's a reflection on a journey, from captivity to restoration.
The source material even calls it both a mirror and a map. So a mirror to reflect where they came from, then a map to show how to move forward.
Yeah.
It's sort of a quiet telling of how memory, faith, and purpose actually survived when everything else was being systematically stripped away.
And that focus is really consistent with the author's background. I mean, Abdul Hashim Bo Muhammad, he's an IT project manager, a writer, a cultural thinker. He approaches this with an engineer's focus on clarity.
Purpose.
Exactly. And this is his first published work from 2025, published under BM Publishing.
So let's just get straight to the core thesis. I think we should, because it's such a powerful declaration, and it really sets the tone for the entire book.
Please.
It's that the culture did not and does not begin in chains, and it won't end in struggle. It was born from strength, from order, from divine purpose.
Right.
The story, as he puts it, was interrupted but never erased.
And that phrase right there, that's the intellectual center of the entire work. It just fundamentally redefines the narrative.
That's a huge shift.
It is. It's a shift from seeing the historical journey as, mainly a tragedy of loss, which is often the standard framing we get.
Right.
And instead it becomes a testimony of deep foundation, of unbreakable internal systems. And Muhammad structures this whole argument across 7 central themes.
So he traces the journey from that theft of identity through the survival of memory, community, and all the way to restoration.
And finally to unification, yes.
So let's unpack that. Let's start with Chapter 1, The Stolen Story. Before the ships, the author describes this state of wholeness, meaningful names, traditions that kept a balance, and I think most importantly, systems of learning and leadership that, and I'm quoting here, did not need permission to exist.
That last point is so crucial because when you have a society that's self-governing, that's rooted in its own traditions, when its knowledge systems are internal and, sacred, the theft that follows is so much more profound than just physical kidnapping.
It's not just about bodies.
No. The source material argues the theft was aimed at eradicating memory, lineage, and the basic right to define their own beginnings. They were trying to steal the root of identity itself.
And the goal, I guess, was just silence, a cultural void. But this is where that survival mechanism kicks in, which Muhammad describes so beautifully. He says that even in the darkness of the ship hulls, in the fields, these fragments survived. A rhythm, a prayer, a glance between elders that carried wisdom.
And those fragments were the seeds of restoration. They rebuilt what was broken, but they did it in a totally new context. It wasn't passive.
No.
It actively produced a new people, a people forged through struggle and faith who were carrying an inheritance that, you couldn't seize or quantify.
Which brings us to the next logical question, which is how? How was that intangible inheritance held? And that's Chapter 2, The Survival of Memory. We know the attempts to erase identity were just brutal. I mean, cutting language, breaking up families.
Fanning drums, anything that transmitted culture.
But memory, as the text says, found other ways to live. And it wasn't just nostalgia, right? It was strategic.
Deeply strategic. Muhammad shows how the archive was basically transferred. So work songs weren't just about pace. They encoded roots, messages, history.
And the call and response.
The call and response, exactly. It carried complex cultural data, not just emotion.
So this meant that societal roles had to transform. The griots, the traditional West African historian, became the grandmother telling stories.
Exactly. The formal archive became the song, the spiritual. The sermon became a map to the future.
Wow.
And here's the core idea of this chapter, and it's a big one. The body itself became the library. All that knowledge, the history, the tradition, it was physically encoded in movement and rhythm. Things that couldn't be burned or banned.
When you put it that way, memory stops being this sentimental thing and it becomes a tool, a practical tool. It wasn't about wishing for the past. It was a strategy for keeping dignity intact, for seeing freedom before it was even a political reality.
Precisely. And that unbreakable foundation of memory that then became the basis for the external systems they built. Which takes us right into the pillars of endurance.
Starting with chapter 3, the faith that endured.
Right.
And what's remarkable here is the idea that faith was the one thing they couldn't lock away. The spirit that was there before the ships. It was already present.
Yes. The author really emphasizes that. Before they even heard the word God in a new language, the people already had this profound spiritual knowledge. They knew the structure of the cosmos, the cycles of life.
That the living and the ancestors walk side by side.
Exactly. So when new religious forms were introduced, that existing foundation allowed for this blending, and it created something incredibly powerful.
So the songs they sang were prayer and protest and history all at once.
All at once. And this faith, it wasn't just for personal comfort. It created a system for mobilization. The church was never just a building.
It was a school.
It was a school, a strategy room, a refuge. It was the place where freedom could be affirmed as a divine promise, not some political concession.
And you can see that application of faith in the figures he mentions. Harriet Tubman's North Star journey was guided by that conviction.
And Frederick Douglass, who understood the power of the word, Sojourner Truth, who spoke truth to power with this fearless spiritual authority.
So faith here is defined as endurance. It's the fuel for a long journey, not just immediate comfort.
That's the core of it. And that shared endurance, that's what allowed the community to stand when the world finally shifted. Which brings us to chapter 4, rebuilding community.
So freedom arrives, but with no instructions, no economic support. The chains are gone, but the weight is still there.
Right. Displacement, poverty.
But the text argues they didn't wait. They just built, using, as he says, only hands, heart, and memory.
And this rebuilding was so deliberate. Neighbors became kin, replacing those broken family structures. Elders guided the young, passing on that library stored in the water.
And education becomes what he calls the second freedom. The classroom wasn't just for reading and writing. It was sacred ground.
It was. Teachers were the new keepers of liberation. They were teaching not just how to read, but how to think, how to dream, how to lead.
This all leads to a concept that I found fascinating. The economy of care.
Mm-hmm.
We're used to measuring wealth in, currency, assets. But Muhammad argues that this new community measured its wealth in the strength of the circle.
Yes. The community was the shield. It was the proof that freedom had actually taken root.
And that focus on collective strength and memory, that's really what paves the path toward today.
Which brings us to chapter 5, the modern identity.
Mm-hmm.
And the text defines this modern experience as living within two reflections, the seen and the unseen.
And the challenge there for the modern identity is how to navigate that. How do you stay true to that foundation when the world is constantly trying to define you?
Trying to force you to assimilate or maybe isolate.
Right, but the author says you don't have to choose. The conclusion is that they are children of two worlds, one born in Africa, carrying that foundation, and one built in America, forged in struggle.
So the strength is in the synthesis, not having to discard one for the other.
Exactly. He calls the modern identity creation in motion. It's this continuous process of invention that's always informed by memory.
And that takes us directly to chapter 6, which I think has the most critical idea in the whole book, the restoration.
This is where he makes a crucial separation. Restoration is defined as rebuilding the present with memory, the foundation. It is not, and he's very clear, it's not returning to the past.
Let's pause on that, because that distinction is so central to his whole argument. Why is avoiding that return to the past so critical?
Well, I think because the past, as sacred as it is, it's static. If your only goal is to return, you're implying that the interruption caused a loss you can't get back.
Which undermines the entire thesis.
Yeah.
That the story was interrupted but not erased.
Exactly. True restoration has to be active. It requires, truth and reckoning, naming the pain, honoring the sacrifice, and releasing the shame that was never theirs to begin with.
That makes perfect sense. So while the world might see progress as just moving forward, linear,
Right.
Muhammad sees restoration as a return to, what, alignment?
Yes, alignment. That's the perfect word. Advancement without grounding is just directionless. Restoration is about grounding modern progress in those foundational values that survived.
Making sure the things that matter are put back in their proper place of authority today.
Which culminates in the vision he presents in chapter 7, unification.
Which is described as a collective remembering. It's the realization that the same spirit that built those great empires still speaks through the community today.
It's a continuation.
A continuation of a story that refused to die.
And the text is clear that unification requires action. It's an intentional choice to come together as one voice, lifting each other up without envy.
It's the promise of the full circle. When they teach the children their true history, honor the elders, and walk toward those collective goals, the story isn't just remembered, it's actively rewritten in the present.
Before we wrap up, we should touch on the scope of that foundation, because the appendix details the immense diversity of the African origin.
That context is vital. It helps you understand the depth of what was interrupted. Muhammad organizes it into 5 great regions. You have North Africa, West Africa, Central, East, and Southern Africa, each with its own unique strength.
Cradle of empires, artistry, ancient birthplace.
And the key takeaway from that section is that the strength of the foundation has always been its diversity. The resilience isn't in uniformity. It's in recognizing that every separate story is part of one powerful whole.
And the epilogue really drives that home. This is a living process.
Yeah.
The journey doesn't end on the last page. It's still being written, still becoming.
So what does this all mean for you as a learner looking for perspective? I think the core shift this deep dive offers is moving away from seeing this history only through a lens of tragedy and loss, and instead embracing the author's perspective, that this is a testimony of foundation, of transformation, and of an inherent strength that survived beneath the surface of all that pain.
And the author, coming from a career in IT project management that demands precision and application, he didn't write this as just theory.
No, it's an instruction manual.
It is. The story isn't meant to be filed away. It's meant to be built upon.
And that leaves us with a final challenge, one that builds directly on Muhammad's call for practical restoration and alignment. If restoration is truly about reclaiming the foundation that time and force could not destroy, what specific living practice in your community, your family, or your own professional life do you carry forward today from the enduring wisdom contained in that story?